On the topic for today, I'm okay with not having any snow, but my 7-year-old, on the other hand, not okay with it. My 2- and 5-year-old, the last snow we had, it was a really good, thick, sticky snow. So she went off and pouted one day, and the smaller two and I made a snowman. She came out and saw the snowman, and she's like, next time we have a snow, Mom, can we build a snowman? We're still waiting. Fellow Toastmasters, I hate Januaries. Hate them. And it's not because of the snow. It's not even because of the cold. Sorry, Susan. It's not even because year ends anymore. I hate Januaries because of 3 last Januaries that I have had in my life. Last year, my husband's grandfather died the last week of January. 2 years ago, my best friend from high school's brother died suddenly the last week of January. And 3 years ago, my family and I were planning my father's funeral last week of January. My dad was at every important moment in my life. He was at every spelling bee, every graduation. He even walked me down the aisle. At my wedding, the song that I had chosen for our father-daughter dance was, "Did You Ever Know You Were My Hero?" After the wedding, I framed a picture of us, gave it to him, which sat on his desk, and the frame read, "The first man a woman ever loves is her father, and that will never change." When my husband and I chose to make Pender our hometown, I had the opportunity to work with my dad every day. He was the CFO, I was the accounting manager. Now, he was not only my personal, I could not only look up to him personally, I also looked up to him professionally. He was my mentor and guided me to become the strong professional woman that I am today. He was always my rock. And that is why my world was rocked when at 3:15 the morning of January 27th, my mom called us and wanted my husband to help her load my dad up into a car and get him to the hospital. We live across the street from my parents, as some of you may know, and she didn't want to burden the local rescue squad by just traveling 2 short blocks. They were able to get him to the hospital, and at the hospital, they were met with a nurse with a wheelchair, and as they moved my dad into the wheelchair, she said, "We're going to go for a ride, Jerry." He looked up to her and said, "Hot dog!" Those were his last words before he sunk into his coma. They took CAT scans, and the local PA looked at the CAT scans. Everything looked fine. My mom called me and said, I think there's just a mess up with his medication. Everything's good. So we tried to go back to sleep. And about a half hour later, she called us back and said, "The local doctor has now come up and looked at the CAT scans. Your dad has an intracranial brain hemorrhage, and they've called the lifeline." I went to the hospital, talked to my mom, and that's when the local doctor told me, "You need to call your sisters who lived in Minneapolis and Denver, and you need to have them come and bring their funeral clothes." I loaded up Mom, we drove up to Sioux City here, and it was a very quiet drive. When we arrived, we met with a neurosurgeon who had just performed emergency brain surgery on my dad. The conversation still looked somewhat of a blur, but what I remember was that it ended with, "There's a 5% chance that your husband will make it the next 24 hours. And if he does, there's a 95% chance that he will be a vegetable. You need to discuss organ donation." As they wheeled my dad into the ICU, my mom and I waited. My sisters came that afternoon, and we decided to keep 2-hour watches with my dad in the ICU so he would never be alone. Miraculously, almost 24 hours to the minute my mom called me, at 3 in the morning when my little sister was keeping an eye on my dad, he woke up. The ICU nurses were amazed and they were happy, but we were still kind of confused because he woke up, he had lots of tubes in his mouth so he couldn't talk, but he kept writing on his leg, "How old am I?" 67, Dad. We waited. 30 seconds later. "How old am I?" 67. He had completely lost his short-term memory, so we knew it was going to be a struggle. The next day, the neurosurgeon asked to meet with my family. We didn't know why, but he came to the waiting room, met with my family for over an hour. He was elated and happy, and the word miracle was used more than once. He had never seen anything like this. They projected a full recovery, and we celebrated. My dad spent the next 6 weeks at Mercy, ICU, stroke ward, and rehab. With the brain trauma, it's a long road, but we celebrated with little milestones. I went over every day at lunch and ate lunch with my dad. And there were some days, every day we asked him, "Where are you, Dad?" He would say, "Vegas." He'd say, "Spain." He literally had no idea where he was. But we celebrated the small steps. He came home mid-March. We never did leave him alone again for about 2 months because he really struggled with the short-term memory, but someone was always with him. Today, my rock is back to his normal self. I say normal because he's changed a little bit, living this second leash on life to its fullest. He's a little bit more ornery these days. He's dropped over 120 pounds. He's become very healthy and living life to its fullest. He and my mom have built a great life, and they're enjoying this retirement life to its fullest. He embraces every moment with my family. He now has 6 grandchildren. He lives across the street from us. We try to visit as often as we can. And we are very happy for them and selfishly happy for ourselves. And I am happy and proud to say that I'm thankful that my rock is still here and here with us today, because he is the first man that I have ever loved, and that will never change.
Thanks, James, for that very moving speech. It's very effective speech. Also, so if I can introduce the next speaker, would be Jamie.